My daughter slammed her hand against the marble dining table and screamed, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares what you think you are, just a spare part in this house, so finish your food and go to your room." The crystal wine glass in front of me trembled. My son-in-law Brian smirked behind his napkin. My 16-year-old grandson Justin did not even look up from his iPhone, simply snickering as he typed a text message. For 71 years, I have lived by a code of logic and logistics. I served as a director of logistics for a global shipping firm for 3 decades. I moved cargo across oceans. I managed crises that could bankrupt nations. I have never been told to shut up in my own home. I did not yell back. I did not throw my plate. I simply looked at Rachel. I looked at the woman I had raised. The woman whose private school tuition cost more than my first house. The woman who was currently wearing a diamond necklace I bought for her mother. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood floor. I walked out of the dining room, and I never went back. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to walk away from people who did not know your worth. My name is Harold Anderson, but everyone calls me Hal. I am 71 years old, and for the last 5 years I have been a ghost in my own mansion. I sat in my study earlier that afternoon staring at a piece of paper that made my blood run cold. It was the monthly statement for the American Express Platinum card I authorized for Rachel. $14,500. The itemized list was a testament to her vanity. Pilates private sessions, a weekend spa retreat in Napa, 3 designer handbags. I picked up my pen, a heavy Mont Blanc that my late wife Catherine gave me for our 25th anniversary. I signed a check for $4,000 to a catering company called Elite Bites. This was for tonight's dinner. Rachel wanted to impress her friends from the country club. She told me I was paying for it because it was my contribution to the household expenses. I placed the check in an envelope. I looked around the room. This study was the last sanctuary I had left. This house in Greenwich, Connecticut is worth $2 million. I bought it cash 10 years ago so Catherine and I could retire in comfort. It has 6 bedrooms, a pool, and a 3-car garage. But I do not sleep in the master bedroom anymore. 3 years ago, Rachel told me that she and Brian needed more space. They said my snoring was keeping them awake even though their room was down the hall. They moved my things into the guest room on the first floor next to the kitchen. It is a small room with a single window that looks out at the driveway. They took the master suite with the balcony and the jacuzzi. They took the space where Catherine took her last breath. I allowed it. I told myself it was to keep the peace. I told myself that family helps family. I was a fool. I looked at the calendar on my desk. Today was Friday. The dinner was scheduled for 7. Brian would be there. Brian is 40 years old and calls himself a serial entrepreneur. In the 10 years he has been married to my daughter, he has started 6 companies. None of them have made a single dollar of profit. I have funded every single one. He calls them seed investments. I call them charity. Last month he asked for $50,000 for a cryptocurrency trading bot. I refused. He has not spoken to me since. He walks past me in the hallway as if I am a piece of furniture. I checked the time. It was 6:30. I could hear the caterers setting up in the dining room. I heard Rachel shouting at the staff. She treats service workers like dirt. It makes my stomach turn. I stood up and adjusted my tie. I put on my navy blue blazer. I still dress for dinner. It is a habit I cannot break. Dignity is a discipline. I walked out of my study and into the kitchen. The smell of roasted lamb filled the air. Rachel was there inspecting a tray of appetizers. She wore a silk dress that probably cost $2,000. She looked at me with critical eyes. "Dad, try not to embarrass us tonight," she said. Her voice was sharp. "The neighbors are coming over later for drinks. Just eat your dinner and then go to your room. Don't start telling your boring stories about shipping containers. Nobody finds them interesting." I nodded slowly. I did not trust my voice. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with my grandmother's silverware. Brian was already seated, pouring himself a glass of the Cabernet Sauvignon I had been saving for a special occasion. He did not ask if I wanted any. He filled his glass to the brim. Justin was slumped in his chair, wearing headphones. "Take those off, Justin," Rachel snapped as she sat down. Justin rolled his eyes and pulled the headphones down around his neck. The music was still playing, tinny and irritating. So Brian said, taking a large gulp of wine, "I have a meeting with a venture capitalist on Monday. This tech incubator idea is going to be huge. We are talking unicorn status in 3 years. Hal, you really should reconsider getting in on the ground floor." I cut my lamb. It was overcooked. I paid $4,000 for overcooked lamb. "I think I will keep my money in bonds, Brian," I said calmly. "My risk tolerance is low these days." Brian scoffed. "That is the problem with your generation. No vision. You just want to hoard wealth. You do not understand how the modern economy works." I chewed slowly. "I understand that you cannot spend money you do not have, Brian. I understand that revenue must exceed expenses. That is a timeless principle." Rachel sighed loudly. "Stop it, Dad. Don't start lecturing him. Brian is a visionary. You spent your life moving boxes. It is not the same thing." The disrespect was palpable. It hung in the air like smoke. But I kept eating. I had endured this for years. I told myself it was for Justin. I wanted to be a grandfather. I wanted to be a male role model for the boy. But Justin was becoming a clone of his father. Maria, the housekeeper, came in to refill the water glasses. Maria has worked for me for 15 years. She nursed Catherine when she was sick. She is a good woman. As she poured water into Justin's glass, her hand shook slightly, and a few drops spilled onto the tablecloth. "Watch it, you idiot," Justin snapped. "Are you blind? Look what you did." He shoved his glass away, and water sloshed onto Maria's apron. She flinched and began to apologize profusely. "I'm so sorry, sir. I will clean it up." "Leave it," Justin said. "Just get out of my face. You are incompetent." Something inside me snapped. It was a small sound, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. It was the sound of my patience finally dying. I placed my fork down. "Apologize to her, Justin," I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the room. Justin looked at me with a sneer. "What? You heard me. You were rude. Maria is a human being. You will apologize to her right now." Justin laughed. A short, cruel sound. "She is the help, Grandpa. That is what she is paid for. To get yelled at when she messes up." He looked at his mother for support. Rachel was sipping her wine, looking bored. "Dad, leave him alone," Rachel said. "He is a teenager, and Maria is clumsy. She ruined the tablecloth." I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman I held in my arms when she was born, the woman I comforted when she scraped her knee, the woman whose tuition debts I paid off so she could start her life debt-free. "Rachel," I said, "you are raising a brat. If you do not correct him now, he will become a useless man, just like his father." The room went silent. Brian turned purple. He slammed his wineglass down. "Hey, watch your mouth, old man. You are living in our house. You should show some respect." Our house. The words echoed in my ears. "This house is in my name, Brian," I said. "I bought it. I pay the taxes. I pay the electricity that powers your video games. I pay for the food in your stomach. You are a guest here. A permanent, ungrateful guest." That was when it happened. Rachel stood up. Her face was twisted with rage. "Shut up, Dad," she screamed. "Just shut up. I am so sick of your arrogance. Nobody cares what you think. You are just a spare part in this house. We only keep you around because we feel sorry for you. You are a lonely, bitter old man. So finish your food and go to your room. And stay there. I looked at her. I looked at Brian, who was smirking. I looked at Justin, who was typing on his phone again, probably telling his friends how his grandpa was causing a scene. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was clarity. Absolute, cold clarity. For years I had been terrified of being alone. I tolerated the insults, the theft, the disrespect because I thought loneliness was the worst fate. But looking at these three people, these parasites feeding on my life force, I realized I was already alone. I had been alone since Catherine died. These people were not my family. They were my tenants. And they were delinquent. I did not say a word. I did not finish my food. I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. I turned around and walked out of the dining room. "Where are you going?" Rachel shouted after me. "Do not walk away when I am talking to you." I ignored her. I walked down the hallway past the guest room that was supposed to be my bedroom. I did not go in. I walked straight to my study. I closed the door and locked it. I went to the wall safe behind the painting of the ship I used to captain. I spun the dial. 041252, Catherine's birthday. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside were my passports, the deed to the house, some gold coins, and a thick yellow folder. I had prepared this folder 2 years ago. I called it Plan B. I hoped I would never have to use it. It contained the nuclear codes for my life. I took the yellow folder. I took my passport. I took the spare key to my Lincoln Continental. I put them in my leather briefcase. I looked around the study one last time. I looked at the photos on the shelf. Me and Catherine in Paris. Me and a young Rachel at her graduation. I took the photo of Catherine and put it in my pocket. I left the photo of Rachel. I unlocked the study door. I walked to the front foyer. The voices from the dining room were loud. They were laughing now. They were mocking me. "He will be back," Brian said. "He has nowhere else to go. He is too old to function on his own." I opened the heavy oak front door. The night air was crisp. I stepped out onto the porch. I had my house keys in my hand. The brass key to the front door. The silver key to the back gate. The electronic fob for the alarm system. Rachel opened the dining room door and stuck her head out into the hallway. "Dad." "Where are you going? It is 8 o'clock. You cannot drive at night. Your eyes are bad." My eyes were perfect. I had LASIK surgery 6 months ago. I just never told them because I didn't want to drive them to the mall. "I am going out," I said. "Don't be ridiculous," Rachel huffed. "Come back inside. If you leave now, do not expect me to open the door for you at midnight. I am changing the alarm code." I looked at the keys in my hand. I looked at the manicured lawn that I paid $500 a month to maintain. I looked at the house that was supposed to be my legacy. "You do not have to worry about that, Rachel," I said. I raised my arm and threw the keys. They sailed through the air, catching the light from the porch lantern. They landed with a soft clatter in the dense, thorny rose bushes that lined the driveway. Rachel gasped. "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Pick those up right now." I turned my back on her. I walked to my car. I got in and started the engine. The V6 engine purred. It was a sound of power. It was a sound of freedom. I backed out of the driveway. I saw Rachel standing in the doorway, screaming something, but I could not hear her through the soundproof glass. I did not look back. I drove down the long, winding driveway and turned onto the main road. I drove for 30 minutes until I reached the city center. I pulled up to the valet stand at the Ritz-Carlton. "Good evening, sir," the valet said, opening my door. "Welcome back, Mr. Anderson." I handed him the keys. "Keep it close, son," I said. "I might need it in the morning." I walked into the lobby. The marble floors shone. The air smelled of fresh lilies. I approached the reception desk. The manager knows me. I have maintained a corporate membership here for 20 years. Another thing Rachel did not know. "Mr. Anderson, what a surprise," the manager said. "We were not expecting you." "I need a suite, Michael," I said, "for an indefinite period. And I need you to send a bottle of your best scotch to the room." "Certainly, sir." The usual. I went up to the penthouse suite. I sat on the velvet sofa and poured myself a drink. I took a sip. It burned in a good way. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had 15 missed calls from Rachel. 7 text messages. "Where are you?" "This isn't funny, Dad. Pick up the phone. You are acting like a child. We are worried sick. Brian is going to call the police. Answer me." I did not answer. I opened my contacts list and scrolled down to the letter L. Leonard Ross. Leonard has been my lawyer and my best friend for 40 years. He is the nastiest shark in the legal waters of New York, but he is loyal to me. I pressed call. It rang twice. Hal Leonard's voice was gravelly. "It is 9 o'clock on a Friday. Did someone die?" "Not yet," I said. "But the old Hal Anderson is dead." "What happened, Hal?" "They crossed the line, Leonard. Rachel told me to shut up. She told me I was a spare part." There was a silence on the line. Then Leonard let out a low, dangerous chuckle. "So it is time." "Yes, Leonard," I said. "It is time." "Open the yellow file." "Are we going with the scorched earth protocol?" Leonard asked. I looked out the window at the city lights below me. I thought about the disrespect, the theft, the cruelty. I thought about Brian's smirk. "No, Leonard," I said. "Scorched earth is too quick. I want the slow squeeze. Initiate phase 1. Cut the cards, freeze the accounts, and call the power company." "You want me to turn off the lights?" Leonard asked. "I want you to turn off everything I said. Let them sit in the dark." I hung up the phone. I finished my scotch. For the first time in 5 years, I slept like a baby. The next morning, I woke up at 7. I ordered coffee and eggs Benedict from room service. I ate slowly, enjoying the silence. I picked up my iPad and opened the security camera app connected to the house. I had installed cameras everywhere 2 years ago after I noticed cash missing from my wallet. Rachel and Brian thought they were just outdoor security cameras, but I had internal feeds in the kitchen and the living room. They had no idea. I watched the feed. It was 10 in the morning. Rachel walked into the kitchen wearing her silk robe. She looked hungover. She opened the cupboard where the expensive Colombian coffee was kept. It was empty. I had taken the last bag with me in my briefcase. She slammed the cupboard shut. She went to the fancy espresso machine Brian insisted we buy for $3,000. She pressed the button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The machine was working fine, but there were no beans. She screamed a curse word that would make a sailor blush. She pulled out her phone and dialed my number. On my iPad screen, I saw my phone light up. I declined the call. She threw her phone on the counter. She stormed to the fridge. She opened it. It was fully stocked with organic food I had paid for. She took out a carton of orange juice and drank directly from the carton. Then the doorbell rang. I switched the camera view to the front porch. It was Mr. Henderson, the landscaper. He was a big man with a thick mustache. He looked impatient. Rachel opened the door. "What do you want?" she snapped. "I want my money, Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Henderson said. $400 for this week's work. Your father usually leaves cash in an envelope under the mat. It is not here. My father is out running errands." Rachel lied. "Come back later." "I cannot come back later," Henderson said. "I have a crew to pay. I need the money now or we stop working, and we take the new hydrangeas we just planted." Rachel scoffed. Fine. Do you take cards? I have a Square reader on my phone, Henderson said. Rachel marched back into the house and grabbed her purse. She pulled out the black Amex card. My card. The one she was an authorized user on. She marched back to the porch and handed it to Henderson. He swiped it. He frowned. He swiped it again. It is declined, ma'am. That is impossible, Rachel said. That card has no limit. Try it again. He tried it again. Declined. Do you have another card? Henderson asked. Rachel pulled out a Visa. Declined. She pulled out a MasterCard. Declined. I sat in my hotel suite sipping my coffee. Leonard works fast. He had canceled every supplementary card at 9 a.m. sharp. This machine must be broken, Rachel yelled. The machine is fine, Lady Henderson said. Look, I am taking the hydrangeas, and do not call us again until you have cash. He walked away. Rachel stood on the porch in her robe watching him dig up the expensive flowers she had demanded I buy last week. She looked furious. She looked scared. I zoomed in on her face. This was just the beginning. The gardening bill was $400. The mortgage payment was due on Monday. The electricity bill was due on Tuesday. And Brian's car lease payment was due on Wednesday. I watched as Brian walked out onto the porch, rubbing his eyes. What is going on, babe? He asked. The cards are not working, Rachel screamed, and Dad is not answering. Brian laughed. He probably forgot to pay the bill. The old man is losing it. Do not worry, I will go to the bank and sort it out. I need to transfer some funds anyway for my meeting. I watched Brian walk to the driveway. He approached his Mercedes S-Class, a car I leased in my name because his credit score is lower than the temperature in Antarctica. He pressed the unlock button on his key fob. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Nothing. He pulled on the handle. Locked. I smiled. The leasing company has a wonderful feature called remote immobilization. If the owner reports the vehicle as possibly compromised, they lock the engine and the doors remotely. I had reported it compromised at 8 a.m. Brian kicked the tire. He looked like a child who had dropped his ice cream. This was going to be a very interesting weekend. I poured myself another cup of coffee and settled in to watch the show. But I knew this was just the soft opening. The real main event was coming. I had a meeting with a real estate investor named Mr. Henderson on Monday. Not the gardener. A different Mr. Henderson. A man who specializes in a very specific type of property transaction called a life estate deed. Rachel thought she was inheriting a mansion. She was about to find out she was inheriting a nightmare. The phone rang. It was Leonard. Phase 1 is complete, Hal, Leonard said. The banks are locked, the credit lines are frozen, and I just sent a courier to the house with a notice. What notice? I asked. A notice of breach of contract, Leonard said, regarding the authorized user agreement. It states that any attempt to access the accounts is now considered fraud. Perfect, I said. Hal Leonard paused. Are you sure you want to go through with the power cut? It is going to be 90 degrees this weekend. I looked at the screen. I saw Justin walking out of his room screaming that the Wi-Fi was down. I am sure, Leonard, I said. They like the heat. Let them sweat. I hung up. I watched my family implode in high definition. I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I felt only the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet finally being corrected. They wanted me to be silent. They wanted me to be invisible. Well, now I was invisible, and my silence was about to become the loudest thing they had ever heard. The heavy door of the presidential suite clicked shut behind me, sealing out the world with a reassuring, expensive thud. I stood in the foyer for a moment, just breathing. The air here did not smell of stale vape smoke or my son-in-law's cheap body spray. It smelled of fresh orchids and lemon polish. It smelled of silence. For the first time in 10 years, I did not have to worry about walking too loudly or turning the television volume up too high. I was 71 years old, and I had just run away from home like a teenager, but instead of a backpack, I had a platinum credit card and a plan that would bring my ungrateful family to their knees. I walked into the bedroom. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, with a thread count higher than Brian's IQ. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the digital clock. It was 2:14 in the morning. At home, if I went to the kitchen at this hour, Rachel would storm out of her room screaming about how I was disrupting her sleep cycle. She would lecture me about the electricity cost of opening the refrigerator door. She would treat me like a senile old man wandering the halls. I picked up the bedside telephone. I pressed the button for in-room dining. A pleasant voice answered immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson. How may we serve you?" "I want a Wagyu beef burger," I said. "Medium rare, with truffle fries. And send up a bottle of the 1995 vintage Cabernet, and a slice of cheesecake." "Certainly, sir. Will there be anything else?" "No, that is all." I hung up. The bill would be over $300 for a midnight snack. Rachel would have an aneurysm if she knew. The thought made me smile. For a decade, I had scrutinized every penny I spent on myself wearing shirts until the collars frayed and driving my car until the engine rattled, all to save money for my grandson's college fund and my daughter's lifestyle. I had denied myself everything so they could have everything, and they told me to shut up. They told me I was a spare part. Half an hour later, I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window eating the best burger I had ever tasted. I washed it down with wine that cost more than Brian's weekly contribution to society. I looked at the lights of the city below. Somewhere out there in the dark, my daughter was sleeping in a master bedroom she did not pay for, dreaming of a gala she could not afford. She thought she was the queen of the manor. She did not know the castle was built on sand, and I had just kicked away the foundation. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and picked up my cell phone. I dialed Leonard. I knew he would be awake. Leonard Ross sleeps 3 hours a night and spends the rest of the time figuring out how to legally destroy people who annoy him. He answered on the first ring. "Status report, Hal." "I am at the Ritz," I said. "I just ordered room service." "It tasted like victory," good Leonard said. "Now about the assets. I have the paperwork ready for the freeze. Do you want to give them a warning shot, or do you want to drop the guillotine?" "Drop it," I said. "I want full Phase 1 implementation." "Understood," Leonard said. "I am logging into the joint accounts right now. I am transferring the liquid cash into a holding trust in your name only. By the time they wake up, the checking account balance will be 0.00. "Do it," I said. "And the credit cards?" Leonard asked. "You have 4 authorized user cards linked to your primary Amex Centurion account. Rachel, Brian, and Justin." "Cancel them," I said. "Do not just suspend them, Leonard. Report them as compromised. Flag them for fraud. I want the terminals to scream declined when they try to buy a stick of gum." "Done," Leonard said. "I can hear the keystrokes. What about the utilities?" "Kill them," I said. "Electricity, water, gas, internet. Cancel the contracts. Tell the providers the owner has vacated the premises and any further service is unauthorized. It will take 24 hours for the physical shut-off," Leonard warned. "That is fine," I said. "Let them have one last day of comfort. It will make the darkness feel even colder." "Anything else, Hal?" "Yes," I said. "The life estate deed. The nuclear option." "I have the papers on my desk," Leonard said. "Mr. Henderson is ready to move. But Hal, once we execute that deed, there is no going back. The house belongs to the investment firm. You lose the title." I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. I looked old, but my eyes were sharp. "I lost that house a long time ago, Leonard," I said. "It ceased to be a home the day my wife died. Now it is just a building filled with parasites. Sign the papers. Transfer the title. I want Henderson to evict them before the ink is dry. Consider it done, Leonard said. Try to get some sleep, Hal. Tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. I hung up the phone. I finished my wine. I crawled into the massive soft bed and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I did not dread the morning. I could not wait for the sun to rise. I could not wait for the show to begin. The sun was high over the city, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my suite at the Ritz. But on the screen of my iPad, it was just another gloomy morning in the house that used to be my prison. I sat in a plush armchair, nursing a cup of fresh black coffee that I had not brewed myself. It was 10:15 in the morning. At home, this was the time the house usually held its breath, waiting for the Queen to descend. I watched the live feed from the kitchen camera. The room was pristine because I had cleaned it before I left. The granite countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting. The silence was absolute until Rachel walked in. She was wearing a silk kimono that cost $600, a gift from me last Christmas, which she had complained was the wrong shade of peach. Her hair was a mess and she was dragging her feet. She went straight to the coffee pot on the counter. For 10 years, my morning routine had been a military operation designed to service her comfort. I would wake up at 5:30. I would grind the beans. I would ensure the water was filtered. By the time Rachel woke up at 10, there would be a fresh pot of artisanal roast waiting for her, alongside sliced fruit and toast. Today, the pot was cold and empty. The fruit bowl was bare. I saw her stop. She stared at the empty machine. She blinked slowly as if she were witnessing a violation of the laws of physics. She turned around and looked at the door to the guest room. "Room." "Dad," she yelled. Her voice was raspy with sleep. "Dad, where's the coffee?" There was no answer. I took a sip of my own coffee in the hotel room. It was delicious. She groaned and marched over to the machine. She opened the lid. Empty. She opened the canister where I kept the beans. Empty. I had poured them into the trash before I left. Petty perhaps, but effective. She slammed the canister down. "Useless old man," she muttered. She tried to operate the digital interface of the machine. She pressed buttons randomly. Rachel is a woman who claims to be a marketing genius, yet she cannot operate a coffee maker because she has never had to. She grew up with a father who fixed everything before it could break. She poked the screen harder. The machine beeped an error code. She kicked the cabinet. I felt a cold satisfaction. This was the first crack in the facade. She was not angry because she was thirsty. She was angry because the service had stopped. The invisible servant was gone. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, intrusive sound. Rachel jumped. She looked at the digital clock on the oven. 10:20. She tightened her robe and walked to the front door. I switched the camera feed to the porch camera. Standing there was Mr. Kowalski. He has been taking care of the grounds for 5 years. He is a hard-working man who runs a cash-only business. Every Saturday morning at 10:30 sharp, I would hand him an envelope with $400. Rachel knew this. Or rather, she knew the lawn magically stayed manicured, but she never concerned herself with the mechanics of the transaction. She opened the door. She did not smile. "What is it?" she asked. Mr. Kowalski took off his cap. He looked uncomfortable. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson. I am just waiting for your father. He usually has the envelope ready." "My father is not here right now," Rachel said dismissively. "You can come back next week." Kowalski shifted his weight. "With all due respect, ma'am, I cannot do that. We just finished the aeration and overseeding. That is a big job. Materials cost money. I need to pay my crew today." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Fine. How much is it?" $400. Rachel huffed and turned back into the house. She walked to the kitchen island where her purse was sitting. I watched her rummage through it. She pulled out her wallet. She opened it. It was empty of cash. Rachel never carries cash. Why would she when she has a father who acts as a walking ATM? She pulled out the black card, the heavy titanium American Express Centurion card. It shines under the kitchen lights. It is a symbol of ultimate buying power. It is the card she uses to buy her shoes, her spa days, and her validation. It is the card linked directly to my primary account. The card I had Leonard report as stolen at 9 o'clock this morning. She walked back to the front door. "I do not have cash," she said, handing the card to Kowalski. "Do you have a reader?" Kowalski nodded. He pulled a small white square reader from his pocket and plugged it into his phone. He swiped the black metal card. I leaned forward in my hotel chair. This was the moment where the rubber meets the road. Kowalski looked at his phone. He frowned. He swiped the card again. "It is not going through, ma'am," he said. Rachel laughed a short, incredulous sound. "Do not be ridiculous. That card has no limit. It is an Amex Centurion. Try it again. Your internet is probably bad." He tried it again. He showed her the screen. "Declined code 05. Pickup card." Rachel snatched the card back. She looked at it as if it had betrayed her. "There must be a mistake," she said. Her voice was rising an octave. "My father probably forgot to pay the bill. He is getting senile. Here, try this one." She handed him a Visa. This was a supplementary card on my Chase Sapphire account. Kowalski swiped it. Declined. Rachel's face began to flush, a deep red stain creeping up her neck. This was not just inconvenience. This was humiliation. This was a wealthy woman in her silk robe being told she was broke by the gardener in front of her neighbors. "I cannot believe this," she shrieked. "Just wait here." She ran back into the kitchen. She grabbed her phone. She dialed my number. On my iPad screen, I saw the incoming call notification. I let it ring. I watched her on the camera pacing the kitchen floor, biting her thumbnail. She looked small. For the first time in years, she looked small. She hung up and ran back to the door. "Look, he is not answering. You will just have to bill us later." Kowalski put his cap back on. His face was hard. "I do not do billing, Mrs. Anderson. I work for cash. If you cannot pay, I cannot come back, and I will be taking the fertilizer bags we left in the shed." He turned and walked away. "Fine," Rachel screamed after him. "Go. We will find someone better." She slammed the heavy oak door. She leaned against it, breathing hard. She looked at the credit card in her hand. She looked at the empty house. For 38 years, she has walked through life with a safety net woven from my bank accounts. She has never known the terror of a declined transaction. She has never known the shame of not being able to pay a man for his honest work. She walked back to the kitchen. She opened the fridge and stared blankly at the shelves. She was looking for comfort, but there was none. She was looking for answers, but the house was silent. She slammed the fridge door. "Dad," she screamed into the empty room. "Dad, pick up the damn phone." I took another sip of my coffee. It was getting cold, but it still tasted sweet. I did not pick up the phone. I simply watched. This was the first lesson. The world does not care who your father is if the card does not swipe. She was about to learn that her status, her pride, and her lifestyle were all leased. And the lease had just expired. My iPhone sat on the polished mahogany desk of the hotel suite, vibrating with the relentless persistence of a trapped insect. I did not turn it off. I did not put it in a drawer. I left it right there next to my glass of iced water and my new leather-bound notebook. I wanted to see the desperation. I wanted to measure the panic. In logistics, we call this monitoring the supply chain disruption. When the flow of goods stops, the stakeholders scream. And my family was screaming. The screen lit up again. Rachel. This was her 12th attempt in the last hour. I watched the name flash white against the black background. A photo appeared next to her name. It was a picture from her wedding day 15 years ago. She looked happy then. I paid $80,000 for that wedding. I paid for the dress, the flowers, the open bar that Brian drank dry. I remember she hugged me that day and said I was the best father in the world. Now the phone just buzzed and buzzed until the screen went dark again. I took a sip of water and tapped the voicemail icon. The red number indicated 9 new messages. I put the phone on speaker. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. It was time for the performance review. Message 1. 10:45 a.m. Rachel. Her voice was high-pitched, tight with indignation. Dad, this is ridiculous. The gardener just left and took the hydrangeas. Do you hear me? He dug them up. You need to call him and fix this. And transfer money to the joint account immediately. I am at the grocery store, and I do not have cash. This isn't funny. Pick up the phone. Delete. I tapped the trash icon. No concern. Just demands. She was still operating under the assumption that this was a clerical error. Message 2, 11:15 a.m. Brian. His voice was breathless. I could hear wind in the background. He was probably walking home from his locked car. Hey Hal, it's Brian. Listen, buddy, there seems to be a glitch with the Mercedes. The leasing company says it is reported stolen. I know you probably hit the wrong button on your computer or something. Just give them a call, okay? I have a big meeting with investors in an hour. I cannot be late. Call me back. Delete. He did not have a meeting. Brian never has meetings on Saturdays. He has poker games. He was worried about looking poor in front of his friends. Message 3, 12:30 p.m. Justin. This was rare. My grandson only calls me when he wants the latest gaming console. Grandpa, the internet is down. The internet. Mom says you didn't pay the bill. I am in the middle of a ranked match. Fix it. It sucks here. Delete. Not a hello, not a how are you. Just a demand for bandwidth. I looked at the ceiling. I wondered if I had failed them or if they were just broken people. I decided it did not matter anymore. The result was the same. Message 4, 1:45 p.m. Rachel again. The tone had shifted. The anger was being replaced by a strategic layer of fake concern. This was the dangerous phase. Dad, we are getting worried. You never disappear like this. Brian thinks you might be having an episode. You know, like confusion. We just want to make sure you are safe. Please call us. If you don't, we might have to call the hospitals or the police. We just love you, Dad. Please. I let that one linger for a moment before hitting delete. Love. She used the word like a currency she had counterfeited. She was building a narrative. She was laying the groundwork for the senility argument. If I was missing, I was confused. If I was confused, I needed a guardian. If I had a guardian, she got control of the accounts. It was a transparent, clumsy gambit. Message 5, 2:10 p.m. Brian again. He sounded sweaty. Hal, pick up. Rachel is crying. She is really scared. Look, if this is about the $50,000 I asked for, we can forget it. Okay, just come home. We can talk about the rent or whatever. Just stop this. I laughed. A dry sound in the empty room. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought he could barter with me. He did not understand that the store was closed. The inventory was gone. I watched the screen light up again. Rachel. I let it ring. I imagined her in that big kitchen, the one with the granite island. I paid for holding her phone with a white-knuckled grip. She was realizing that the silence on my end was not an error. It was a wall. For years I had answered every call. I had rushed to every emergency. A flat tire at midnight, a bounced check, a leaky roof. I was their fixer. I was their safety net. Now I was just a vibration on a table in a hotel room they could not afford. I opened my notebook. I wrote down the time and a brief summary of each call. Documentation is key. If they tried to claim I abandoned them or that I was mentally unfit, I would have a record of their harassment. I would have a timeline of their greed. The phone buzzed again. A text message from Rachel popped up on the lock screen. "Dad, please. I am sorry if I said something wrong. Just come back." If. That two-letter word told me everything. She was not sorry she had told me to shut up. She was not sorry she had treated me like a servant. She was sorry that the consequences had arrived. She was sorry the wallet had walked out the door. I turned the phone over face down. I did not want to see their names anymore. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was mine. I had spent a lifetime responding to their noise. Now they would have to learn to live with my quiet, and the quiet was going to get much, much louder. I shifted my attention from the phone to the live feed on my iPad. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. The sun was blazing down on the driveway, turning the asphalt into a skillet. The black Mercedes S-Class sat there gleaming like a dark jewel. It was a beautiful machine, a V8 bi-turbo engine, massage seats, and a sound system that cost more than my first car. I leased it 3 years ago because Brian said he needed a vehicle that projected success to potential investors. He said image was half the battle. I paid the $3,000 a month lease. He paid for the pine tree air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror. I watched the back door of the house open. Brian stepped out. He had changed clothes. He was wearing a light gray suit and loafers without socks. He had his leather portfolio tucked under his arm and his sunglasses on. He looked like a man's on his way to close $1 million deal. I knew better. He was on his way to a poker game at the country club, where he would bet money he did not have and drink scotch he could not afford. He was escaping. He was leaving Rachel to deal with the gardener and the empty fridge while he went to play big shot with his friends. He walked with a swagger. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the house one last time, shaking his head with a look of annoyance. He was probably muttering about how unreasonable I was being, about how inconvenient it was that the old man had thrown a tantrum. He approached the car. He pressed the unlock button on the key fob. The lights flashed. The mirrors unfolded. The car welcomed him. It did not know yet that it was a trap. He opened the heavy driver's side door and slid into the Napa leather seat. He closed the door. I could imagine the silence inside. The S-Class is built like a vault. It seals out the world. He placed his portfolio on the passenger seat. He checked his reflection in the vanity mirror. He smiled at himself. A shark in a shark tank. He pressed the start button. On my screen, nothing happened. No smoke from the exhaust. No vibration. Just stillness. Brian frowned. He pressed the button again, harder this time. Still nothing. He looked at the dashboard. He tapped the steering wheel. He was probably thinking it was a dead battery. He was probably thinking he would have to call roadside assistance, which was included in the lease I paid for. Then the infotainment screen lit up. I could not hear the audio from inside the car, but I knew exactly what it was saying. I had authorized the command through the Mercedes Me Connect app at 8:15 that morning. It is a feature designed for theft recovery. It immobilizes the engine and locks the doors to contain the perpetrator until the police arrive. Brian stared at the screen. His mouth opened. He took off his sunglasses. The message on the dashboard would be flashing in red letters. Vehicle reported stolen. Engine disabled. Authorities notified. He grabbed the door handle and pulled. It was locked. He pulled again, yanking it violently. The electronic deadbolts were engaged. He hit the unlock button on the door panel. Nothing. He hit it again and again, his finger stabbing the plastic. The car was in lockdown mode. It had become a prison cell lined with leather and walnut wood. He started to panic. I could see it in his body language. He turned toward the passenger door and lunged across the console. He pulled that handle. Locked. He tried the back doors. Locked. He was trapped. The sun beat down on the black roof. The car had been sitting in the driveway for hours. The interior temperature was climbing rapidly. Without the engine, there was no air conditioning. It was a greenhouse. A very expensive, very airtight greenhouse. Brian started pounding on the window. The glass in an S-Class is double-paned acoustic laminate. It is designed to keep out road noise and paparazzi. It is very hard to break with a human fist. He pounded and screamed. I could see his face contorting. He was yelling for help. But the driveway is long, and the nearest neighbor is acres away. Rachel was inside the house, probably in the back bedroom, sulking. No one could hear him. He loosened his tie. He took off his jacket. Sweat was already darkening his gray shirt. He looked at his phone. He dialed a number. He held it to his ear, and then threw the phone onto the passenger seat. No signal. The metallized glass and the car's body acted as a Faraday cage, blocking most signals, and what little got through was probably too weak for a call. Or maybe I had just gotten lucky. 10 minutes passed. Brian was soaked. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He was red-faced and gasping. He looked like a fish flopping on a deck. He was no longer the cool entrepreneur. He was a terrified man, realizing he had no control. He kicked the dashboard. He tore at the leather steering wheel. He was destroying the interior of a car he did not own. I watched calmly. I took a bite of a crisp apple. This was the man who called me a spare part. This was the man who spent my retirement savings on vanity projects. Now he was sweating out his arrogance one drop at a time. Finally, he reached into the back seat. He grabbed a heavy metal flashlight he kept there for emergencies. He swung it at the driver's side window. The glass cracked, but did not shatter. He swung again with all his might. A spider web of fractures appeared. He hit it a third time, screaming in rage. The safety glass finally gave way, crumbling into thousands of small cubes that rained down onto his lap and the driveway. He cleared the jagged edges with his briefcase, ruining the leather. He scrambled out of the window head first. He fell onto the hot asphalt, scraping his hands and knees. He lay there for a moment, panting, heaving, trying to catch his breath. His suit was ruined. His dignity was gone. He looked like a criminal who had just botched a getaway. He stood up shakily. He looked at the broken window. He looked at the silent car. He kicked the tire and immediately grabbed his foot, hopping in pain. He screamed at the sky. He looked at the security camera mounted on the garage. He knew. In that moment, he knew I was watching. He raised his middle finger at the lens. I smiled. It was an impotent gesture. A last gasp of defiance from a defeated man. He limped toward the house, leaving the car open and broken in the driveway. The alarm finally started to blare, a rhythmic honking that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I closed the app. The car was totaled effectively. The interior damage, the broken glass, the electronics. The lease terms were clear. Any damage caused by negligence or misuse was the responsibility of the lessee. That was me. But I had insurance. And Brian. Brian had nothing. He had no car. He had no meeting. He had no poker game. He was trapped in a house with no money, no internet, and a wife who was rapidly realizing her husband was as useless as a screen door on a submarine. I picked up my notebook. I wrote down. 2:45 p.m. Brian attempts unauthorized use of vehicle. Damages property. Escapes. I closed the book. The heat was rising in Greenwich, and I was just turning up the thermostat. The next phase was going to be even hotter. The utilities were scheduled to cut off at midnight. They would wake up tomorrow in a house that was not just broke but broken, and I would be here eating room service and planning the grand finale. It was Sunday morning, the day the lights went out in Greenwich. I sat on the balcony of my hotel suite, watching the city wake up below me. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, promising a temperature in the mid-90s. It was a perfect day for a barbecue or a swim in the pool. But at my house there would be no swimming, because the pool pump was about to die, and there would be no barbecue, because the electric starter on the grill was about to become a useless button. I looked at my watch. It was 11:59. I had scheduled the utility disconnects for noon sharp. I wanted them to be awake. I wanted them to be comfortable. I wanted them to be in the middle of their digital addictions when the plug was pulled. In logistics, timing is everything. You do not cut the supply line when the enemy is sleeping. You cut it when they are hungry. I opened the security app on my iPad. I had upgraded the system 6 months ago with battery-powered cellular backup cameras. I told Rachel it was for storm safety. In reality, it was for this exact moment. I needed eyes on the ground even when the grid went down. I switched the view to the living room. Justin was sprawled on the leather sofa. He was wearing a headset, screaming at the television. He was playing some online shooter game. His thumbs were moving at light speed. He was in his element. A digital warrior living in a house he did not pay for, using bandwidth he did not earn. Brian was in the kitchen, staring at the microwave. He was trying to reheat a slice of pizza. He looked disheveled. His gray suit from yesterday was crumpled on a chair. He was wearing gym shorts and a stained t-shirt. Rachel was sitting at the island, scrolling through her phone, probably looking for a lawyer who worked on Sundays, or a landscaper who accepted IOUs. The digital clock on the microwave turned to 12:00. Then it happened. The microwave display went black. The hum of the refrigerator compressor cut out. The ceiling fans spun slower and slower until they stopped. The ambient noise of a modern home, the buzz of electricity, the whir of the air conditioning simply vanished. Silence. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then a scream tore through the house. It came from the living room. It was a primal sound, like an animal caught in a trap. "No," Justin shrieked. "No, no, no, lag, lag, lag." He threw his controller at the TV. It bounced off the dark screen. "What happened?" he yelled. "Mom, the Wi-Fi. I lost connection. I was on a kill streak. Fix it. Fix it now." Rachel looked up from her phone. The Wi-Fi symbol on her screen had probably disappeared. "The power is out," she said. Her voice was calm at first. "Just a nuisance." Brian tapped the microwave. "Great," he muttered. "Now my pizza is cold." "Check the breaker box," Rachel said. "Dad probably tripped a fuse with his old equipment." I watched Brian walk to the utility closet. He opened the panel. He flipped the master switch off and on. Nothing. He flipped the individual breakers. Click, click, click. The sound echoed in the dead air. Nothing happened. "It is not the breakers," Brian called out. "The meter is dead." Rachel stood up. She walked to the window. She looked at the neighbor's house across the lawn. Their porch lights were on. Their fountain was running. "The neighbors have power," she said. A note of panic crept into her voice. "Why don't we?" Justin ran into the kitchen. He was red-faced. He was shaking. "I cannot connect to the hotspot either," he screamed. "There is no service." I smiled. I had canceled the family data plan 10 minutes ago. They were now relying on the mercy of public towers, which were notoriously weak in our valley. "It is getting hot in here," Brian said, wiping his forehead. Without the central air conditioning, the house was basically a glass oven. The sun beat down on the large windows. The insulation that kept the heat in during winter was now trapping the solar radiation. The temperature inside would climb to 90 degrees within hours. Rachel went to the sink to get a glass of water. She turned the handle. A thin trickle came out, then a sputter, then nothing. The house is on a well system. The well pump runs on electricity. No power means no water. No water means no ice, no showers, and most importantly, flushing toilets. Rachel turned the handle back and forth frantically. The water, she whispered. The water is gone too. This is impossible, Brian said. This is a utility failure. I am calling the power company. He pulled out his phone. I watched him dial. I could imagine the automated message he was hearing. We are sorry, the account associated with this number has been closed by the account holder. He lowered the phone slowly. His face was pale. They said the account is closed, Rachel. They said the owner terminated service. Rachel grabbed the counter. She looked at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She stared right at me. She knew. He turned it off, she hissed. He turned everything off. Justin kicked the island. I hate him, he screamed. I hate him. I am going to fail my rank. He does not care about your rank, Justin, I said to the empty hotel room. He cares about respect, and you just ran out of credit. I switched the camera view to the pantry. I looked at the shelves lined with gourmet food, truffle oil, imported pasta. Then I looked at the refrigerator. It was a Sub-Zero model that cost $12,000. Inside it was stocked with $300 worth of organic grass-fed steaks. There was a jar of caviar Brian had bought to celebrate his non-existent business deal. There were artisanal cheeses. There was fresh salmon. The temperature inside that metal box was rising. Bacteria were beginning to multiply. The steaks were starting to sweat. The milk was starting to sour. By tomorrow morning, the smell would be unbearable. That food represented hours of my labor. It represented early mornings and late nights at the shipping yard. Now it was rotting, just like their inheritance. I watched Rachel open the freezer. She pulled out a tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. It was already soft. She grabbed a spoon and started eating it aggressively. It was a childish act of consumption. If she couldn't save it, she would eat it. Brian sat at the table. He put his head in his hands. What are we going to do? He asked. We cannot stay here without AC. It is going to be sweltering. We are not going anywhere, Rachel snapped. That is what he wants. He wants to flush us out. We are staying. Justin groaned. Without internet. Are you crazy? I am going to Kyle's house. You are staying here, Rachel yelled. We need to present a united front. When he calls, we need to be here. He is not going to call, Brian said. His voice was hollow. He blocked us, Rachel. The car is bricked. The cards are dead. The lights are out. He is not playing games. This is war. I closed the iPad cover. Brian was smarter than he looked. It was indeed war. And I had just cut off their supply lines. Siege warfare is a slow, ugly business. It breaks the spirit before it breaks the body. They were trapped in a mansion that was rapidly becoming a tomb. A dark, hot, silent tomb filled with the stench of spoiling luxury. I stood up and walked to the thermostat on the wall of my suite. I turned it down to 68 degrees. A cool breeze drifted from the vents. I ordered a glass of iced tea. I had all the time in the world. They had until the ice cream melted, and it was melting fast. It was 4:00 in the afternoon when the inevitable knock came at the door of my suite. It was not the soft, rhythmic tap of the housekeeping staff coming to turn down the bed, nor was it the brisk, professional knock of the room service waiter delivering my afternoon tea. This was a heavy, authoritative pounding. It was the sound of the state demanding entry. I did not jump. I did not panic. In the world of logistics, you learn that every action has a reaction, and I had calculated this specific reaction 12 hours ago. I stood up from the desk where I had been reading the Wall Street Journal. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing a fresh white dress shirt, pressed crisp trousers, and my reading glasses. I looked like a retired executive enjoying a vacation, not a confused geriatric wandering in a fog. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers from the Greenwich Police Department stood in the hallway. One was a young man looking tense and ready for a struggle. The other was a veteran sergeant looking tired. They expected to find a senile old man, perhaps in his pajamas, perhaps shouting at the television. I opened the door. "Good afternoon, officers," I said. My voice was calm, level, and welcoming. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The sergeant blinked. He looked at the room number on the brass plaque, then back at me. The disconnect between the description he had been given and the reality standing before him was palpable. "Are you Harold Anderson?" the sergeant asked. "I am," I replied. "Please come in. It is cooler inside." They stepped into the suite. Their eyes scanned the room. They saw the organized desk, the made bed, the absence of chaos. They saw a man in control of his environment. Mr. Anderson, the younger officer, began, his hand resting near his belt. "We received a call from your daughter, Rachel Anderson. She is very concerned. She stated that you have been missing for 24 hours, that you suffer from advanced dementia, and that you require medication for a heart condition which you left behind. She believes you are a danger to yourself." I smiled. It was a thin smile. Rachel had played the silver alert card. It was a desperate move. She wanted to weaponize the police to drag me back to the house, to force me back into my role as the ATM. She had lied about the medication. My heart is as strong as an ox. I motioned to the sitting area. "Please sit down," I said. "Would you like a bottle of water? Or perhaps some Earl Grey tea?" It just arrived. The officers exchanged a glance. The tension was leaving their shoulders. A man offering Earl Grey tea usually is not having a psychotic break. "No, thank you, sir," the sergeant said. "We just need to verify your well-being. Your daughter was quite insistent. She said you might be disoriented and aggressive." I walked to my desk. I opened my leather briefcase. I took out a crisp white envelope. I had visited Dr. Arthur Cohen, the top neurologist in Connecticut, at 9 o'clock that morning. I had paid cash for an expedited evaluation. I knew Rachel would try to question my sanity, so I bought the proof of my sanity before she could even dial 911. I handed the document to the sergeant. "Officer, I anticipated this visit," I said. "This is a notarized affidavit of mental competency signed 6 hours ago by Dr. Cohen. It states that I am fully oriented, cogent, and capable of making my own financial and medical decisions. It also states that I have no history of dementia and no required heart medication." The sergeant read the paper. His eyebrows went up. He passed it to his partner. "This is dated today," the sergeant said. "Correct," I said. "You see, officers, my daughter is not worried about my health. She is worried about her lifestyle. Yesterday, I stopped paying her bills. I cut off her credit cards, and I left her house, which I own. She is trying to use you to intimidate me into returning so I can resume paying for her mistakes." The sergeant let out a long breath. He looked at the luxury suite. He looked at me. He realized he had been used as a pawn in a domestic financial dispute. Police officers hate domestic disputes, but they hate being lied to even more. "So you are here of your own free will?" the sergeant asked. "I am," I said. "I am enjoying a vacation from my ungrateful family. And you are safe." "I am safer here than I was in that house," I said. The sergeant nodded. He took out his notepad. "Anderson, I apologize for the intrusion. We have to follow up on these reports, especially involving seniors. But it is clear that the report was inaccurate." "It was a lie, Sergeant," I said. It was a false police report filed to harass a citizen. I believe that is a crime. It is a misdemeanor, the sergeant said, his voice hardening. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Subject located. Code 4. Subject is safe, competent, and here voluntarily. No medical assistance required. Cancel the alert. Then he pulled out his cell phone. I need to call the reporting party to close the file, the sergeant said. Please put it on speaker, I requested. I think it is important that there is no ambiguity. The sergeant hesitated, then tapped the speaker button. The phone rang once. Officer, did you find him? Rachel's voice screamed through the speaker. She sounded hysterical, breathless. Is he okay? Is he confused? Do not listen to him if he talks about money. He is having delusions. You need to bring him home immediately. I have his room ready. The sergeant held the phone steady. His face was stone. Mrs. Anderson, this is Sergeant Miller. We are with your father now. Oh, thank God, Rachel sobbed. Is he hurt? Did he know who you were? Just put him in the car, please. We are so worried. Ma'am, stop talking, the sergeant barked. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. We have assessed your father. He is perfectly healthy. He is lucid. He has provided medical documentation proving his competency. He is not missing. He has simply chosen not to speak to you. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. What Rachel whispered. That is impossible. He is sick. He doesn't know what he is doing. He needs me. Mrs. Anderson, the sergeant, continued ignoring her protest. Filing a false missing persons report and making false claims about a medical condition to law enforcement is a violation of the law. You wasted police resources today. We have officers searching the parks when they could have been responding to real emergencies. But he is my father, Rachel shrieked. He walked out. He turned off the power. He is trying to hurt us. It sounds like a civil matter, ma'am, the sergeant said. Do not call 911 again unless there is a life-threatening emergency. If you continue to use the police to harass Mr. Anderson, we will issue a citation for misuse of emergency services. Do you understand? He is lying to you, Rachel yelled. He is manipulating you. Goodbye, Mrs. Anderson. The sergeant hung up. He looked at me. There was a flicker of respect in his eyes. Maybe even solidarity. He probably had kids of his own. He probably knew what it felt like to be taken for granted. Mr. Anderson, if she shows up here, you can call us for trespassing, he said. The hotel security is good, but we can issue a restraining order if necessary. Thank you, Sergeant, I said. I hope it does not come to that, but my daughter does not handle the word no very well. The officers stood up. They declined the water again, but this time with a smile. Enjoy your vacation, Mr. Anderson, the young officer said. I walked them to the door. I locked it behind them. I leaned against the heavy wood. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Rachel had fired her biggest gun. She had tried to strip me of my agency. She had tried to label me as an invalid, and the bullet had ricocheted right back into her face. I walked back to the desk and picked up my phone. I did not call her. I did not text her. I simply opened my email and forwarded the audio file of the police interaction which I had recorded on my iPad to Leonard. Add this to the file, Leonard, I typed. Exhibit C, malicious prosecution and defamation. I sat down and poured myself a cup of tea. It was still warm. I imagined the scene at the house. Rachel staring at her phone in the sweltering heat, realizing that the police were not coming to rescue her lifestyle. Realizing that she could not force me back. Realizing that the narrative of the senile old father had just collapsed. She was trapped. The house was getting hotter. The food was rotting. And now she knew that I was not just away. I was watching. And I was winning. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was a beautiful evening. I decided to go down to the hotel bar for a jazz concert. I put on my jacket. I checked my wallet. I had freedom in my pocket, and it felt lighter than air. The game of cat and mouse was over. Now we were entering the end game, and Rachel was running out of moves. I returned to my suite at 8 in the evening. The jazz concert downstairs had been excellent, a soothing balm of saxophone and piano that washed away the residual tension of the police visit. I felt lighter than I had in years. I felt unbreakable. The hotel staff had turned down the bed and placed a small chocolate on the pillow. It was a detail of care that my own daughter had never managed in a decade of living under my roof. I walked to the window. The city was a grid of amber light. Somewhere in the dark distance, 20 miles away, my house was sitting in blackness. I checked the weather app on my phone. The temperature in Greenwich was still 82 degrees with high humidity. Inside a sealed house without ventilation, it would be closer to 95. The air would be thick and stagnant. The darkness would be absolute. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and sat in the leather armchair facing the view. I picked up my phone. It had been silent for 2 hours. Rachel was regrouping. She was realizing that the silver alert had failed. She was realizing that the police were not her private security force. She was realizing that she was losing. Then the phone buzzed. It was a single text message, a long block of gray text against the black screen. It was from Rachel. I put on my reading glasses. I expected an apology. I expected begging. I expected a sob story about how scared she was in the dark. I did not expect what I saw. Dad, you think you are so smart. You think you won because you tricked those cops with some fake doctor's note. You didn't win anything. You just made me angry. And you do not want to see me angry. This is your last chance. Come home tonight. Turn the power back on. Restore the credit cards. Apologize to Brian. If you do not walk through that door by midnight, I am done playing the dutiful daughter. I just got off the phone with Dr. Peterson. You remember him, right? The one who helped the Millers with their difficult aunt. He owes me a favor. He is willing to sign an affidavit stating you have aggressive early-onset dementia and paranoid delusions. He will testify that you are a danger to yourself and others. We will have you involuntarily committed to Shady Pines. Yes, that Shady Pines. The state facility. The one with the lawsuits and the smell of urine. I will get emergency guardianship. I will take power of attorney. And I will stick you in a room where you will never see the sun again. You will die in a cage wearing a diaper while we live in your house. This is not a threat, Dad. This is a promise. Come home, or lose everything. I read the message twice. I felt a cold sensation in my chest. But it was not fear. It was the sensation of a lock clicking into place. It was the feeling of a puzzle finally being solved. For years I had wondered if Rachel was just spoiled, or if she was truly malicious. I had wondered if her selfishness was a habit or a character flaw. Now I had my answer. She was not just ungrateful. She was a predator. She was willing to fabricate a medical diagnosis to imprison her own father in a state-run hellhole just so she could keep her country club membership. She was willing to erase my freedom to secure her comfort. Dr. Peterson. I knew the name. He was a society doctor who hung around the club bar too much. He was known for writing prescriptions for bored housewives who wanted to lose weight or sleep through the afternoon. He was a man with a gambling problem and a loose ethical code. It made perfect sense that Rachel would turn to him. I looked at the timestamp, 8:15 p.m. She had put it in writing. In the world of corporate logistics, we have a saying, if it is not written down, it did not happen. But if it is written down, it is evidence. Rachel had just committed a felony. She had threatened to conspire with a medical professional to commit fraud and unlawful imprisonment. She had attempted to extort me, and she had sent the proof directly to the victim. I did not reply. I did not type out a furious defense. I did not call her to scream. I took a screenshot of the text. Then I took another, just to be safe. I opened my secure email app. I attached the image. I typed a single line in the subject field. Extortion and conspiracy. Evidence A. I sent it to Leonard Ross. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. It was Leonard. Hal, Leonard said. His voice was low and hard. I just got your email. Did she really send this? Just now, I said. She is dumber than I thought, Leonard said. This is a Class C felony in Connecticut. Attempted larceny by extortion, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, and threatening to unlawfully restrain a person. Hal, this is not a family dispute anymore. This is criminal. I looked at the city lights. I took a sip of my water. I know Leonard. We can have her arrested, Leonard said. I can call the district attorney right now. I play golf with him on Sundays. We can have a warrant issued by morning. Dr. Peterson, too. He will lose his license before noon. I thought about it. I thought about Rachel in handcuffs. I thought about the scandal. It would be satisfying. It would be justice. Not yet, Leonard, I said. Why, Hal? She threatened to put you in a cage. Because arrest is too quick, I said. If she is arrested, she becomes the victim in her own mind. She becomes the martyr. She will cry to the press. She will say I set her up. No, Leonard. I want her to lose the house first. I want her to lose the status. I want her to stand in the dark, knowing she played her ace, and it was a joker. Leonard sighed. You are a cold man, Hal. She learned it from me, I said. Keep this text, Leonard. Notarize the receipt. If she tries to file that guardianship paper with the court, we will drop this on the judge's desk like a nuclear bomb. We will use it to get a permanent restraining order. Understood, Leonard said. I will draft the motion for the restraining order tonight. We will keep it in the chamber. What about Dr. Peterson? Send him a letter, I said. A quiet letter. Tell him we have the text. Tell him if he signs any paper regarding my health, we will forward this text to the State Medical Board and the FBI. Leonard chuckled. That will make him sweat. He will drop Rachel like a hot potato. Exactly, I said. Isolate her. Remove her allies. Let her scream into the void. I will handle it, Leonard said. Stay safe, Hal. She is desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. She is not dangerous, I said. She is just loud, and she is running out of battery. I hung up the phone. I looked at the text one last time. Die in a cage. A daughter saying that to her father. The father who taught her to ride a bike. The father who paid for her braces. I deleted the thread from my main inbox, but kept it in the secure folder. I did not want to look at it every time I opened my phone. It was too ugly. It was the autopsy of a relationship I had tried to keep alive for too long. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow was Monday. The day of the gala, or at least the day Rachel thought was the gala. She was probably sitting in the dark right now, sweating, convinced that her threat would work. Convinced that I was a weak old man who would fold at the first sign of pressure. She did not know that I had dealt with pirates off the coast of Somalia. I had dealt with Union strikes in bold ports. I had dealt with corrupt customs officials in third world countries. A spoiled brat with an iPhone was not going to break me. I turned off the lamp. The room was cool and dark. I closed my eyes. I thought about Brian. While Rachel was threatening me, Brian was probably trying to figure out how to open my safe. He knew I kept emergency cash there. He didn't know I had emptied it weeks ago. He didn't know that the only thing inside was a nasty surprise I had planted for him. Let them plot. Let them threaten. Let them dig their own graves. I had the shovel. and tomorrow I was going to hand it to Mr. Henderson. The heavy door of this presidential suite clicked shut behind me, sealing out the world with a reassuring, expensive thud. I stood in the foyer for a moment, just breathing. The air here did not smell of stale vape smoke or my son-in-law's cheap body spray. It smelled of fresh orchids and lemon polish. It smelled of silence. For the first time in 10 years, I did not have to worry about walking too loudly or turning the television volume up too high. I was 71 years old, and I had just run away from home like a teenager, but instead of a backpack, I had a platinum credit card and a plan that would bring my ungrateful family to their knees. I walked into the bedroom. The sheets were Egyptian cotton with a thread count higher than Brian's IQ. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the digital clock. It was 2:14 in the morning. At home, if I went to the kitchen at this hour, Rachel would storm out of her room screaming about how I was disrupting her sleep cycle. She would lecture me about the electricity cost of opening the refrigerator door. She would treat me like a senile old man wandering the halls. I picked up the bedside telephone. I pressed the button for in-room dining. A pleasant voice answered immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson. How may we serve you?" "I want a Wagyu beef burger," I said. "Medium rare, with truffle fries, and send up a bottle of the 1995 vintage Cabernet, and a slice of cheesecake." "Certainly, sir." "Will there be anything else?" "No, that is all." I hung up. The bill would be over $300 for a midnight snack. Rachel would have an aneurysm if she knew. The thought made me smile. For a decade I had scrutinized every penny I spent on myself wearing shirts, until the collars frayed, and driving my car until the engine rattled all, to save money for my grandson's college fund and my daughter's lifestyle. I had denied myself everything, so they could have everything. And they told me to shut up. They told me I was a spare part. Half an hour later, I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, eating the best burger I had ever tasted. I washed it down with wine that cost more than Brian's weekly contribution to society. I looked at the lights of the city below. Somewhere out there in the dark, my daughter was sleeping in a master bedroom she did not pay for, dreaming of a gala she could not afford. She thought she was the queen of the manor. She did not know the castle was built on sand, and I had just kicked away the foundation. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and picked up my cell phone. I dialed Leonard. I knew he would be awake. Leonard Ross sleeps 3 hours a night and spends the rest of the time figuring out how to legally destroy people who annoy him. He answered on the first ring. "Status report, Hal." "I am at the Ritz," I said. "I just ordered room service." It tasted like victory. "Good," Leonard said. "Now about the assets. I have the paperwork ready for the freeze. Do you want to give them a warning shot? Or do you want to drop the guillotine?" "Drop it," I said. "I want full Phase 1 implementation." "Understood," Leonard said. "I am logging into the joint accounts right now. I am transferring the liquid cash into a holding trust in your name only. By the time they wake up, the checking account balance will be 0.00. "Do it," I said. "And the credit cards?" Leonard asked. "You have 4 authorized user cards linked to your primary Amex Centurion account. Rachel, Brian, and Justin." "Cancel them," I said. "Do not just suspend them, Leonard. Report them as compromised. Flag them for fraud. I want the terminals to scream declined when they try to buy a stick of gum." "Done," Leonard said. "I can hear the keystrokes. What about the utilities?" "Kill them," I said. "Electricity, water, gas, internet. Cancel the contracts. Tell the providers the owner has vacated the premises and any further service is unauthorized. It will take 24 hours for the physical shut-off," Leonard warned. "That is fine," I said. "Let them have one last day of comfort. It will make the darkness feel even colder." "Anything else, Hal?" "Yes," I said. "The life estate deed. The nuclear option. I have the papers on my desk, Leonard said. Mr. Henderson is ready to move. But Hal, once we execute that deed, there is no going back. The house belongs to the investment firm. You lose the title. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. I looked old, but my eyes were sharp. I lost that house a long time ago, Leonard, I said. It ceased to be a home the day my wife died. Now it is just a building filled with parasites. Sign the papers. Transfer the title. I want Henderson to evict them before the ink is dry. Consider it done, Leonard said. Try to get some sleep, Hal. Tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. I hung up the phone. I finished my wine. I crawled into the massive soft bed and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I did not dread the morning. I could not wait for the sun to rise. I could not wait for the show to begin. I sat in the darkness of my hotel suite, illuminated only by the glow of the iPad screen. It was 3:14 in the morning on Monday, the night before the gala. The house in Greenwich was silent and sweltering, but there was movement in the study. I had been waiting for this. I had been predicting this specific act of desperation for 6 months. In the world of logistics, we call it a honeypot. You create an attractive target to lure a security breach into the open. My study safe was the honeypot. For years, I had kept a significant amount of cash there, roughly $50,000 in a fireproof box. I called it the Apocalypse Fund. Rachel knew about it. Brian knew about it. He had eyed that safe 100 times, his gaze lingering on the dial whenever he came in to ask for a loan. He thought it was his emergency piggy bank. He did not know that I had emptied it 3 weeks ago, leaving behind only a single white envelope. I watched the infrared feed. The door to the study creaked open. A beam of light from a heavy flashlight cut through the darkness. It was Brian. He was wearing black clothes like a cartoon burglar. He was sweating profusely. The lack of air conditioning combined with the crushing weight of his own failures had reduced him to a trembling mess. He closed the door behind him and locked it. He did not want Rachel to see this. This was his private crime. He moved to the large oil painting of the clipper ship hanging behind my desk. He took it down with clumsy, shaking hands and set it on the floor. There it was. The wall safe. It was an older model, a heavy steel box installed in the 80s. It looked formidable, but I knew a secret. The locking mechanism was worn. If you applied enough torque to the handle while hitting the side with a rubber mallet, the tumblers would slip. It was a flaw I had never fixed because I lived with family. I thought I was safe. Brian did not have the combination. I had changed it the day I left. He tried a few numbers, likely my birthday or Rachel's birthday. The dial spun uselessly. He cursed softly. He leaned his forehead against the cold steel. He was desperate. He needed cash to flee. He needed cash to pay off the dangerous people he owed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a large flathead screwdriver and a small crowbar he must have taken from the garage. He jammed the screwdriver into the seam of the door. He began to pry. I took a sip of water. I watched him struggle. While he grunted and strained, I thought about the $200,000. That was the number. $200,000 missing from my self-directed IRA account over the last 18 months. I had noticed the discrepancy a year ago. Small wire transfers to a shell company called Future Tech Solutions LLC, 5,000 here, 1,000, 10,000 there. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. I had traced the LLC registration. It was registered to Brian's college roommate. I had the bank records. I had the IP addresses. I had everything. I could have confronted him then. I could have called the police immediately. But I waited. I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to see if he would stop. He did not stop. He drained it. He stole my security to fund his fantasies and his mistresses. He stole the money I had set aside for his own son's future. On the screen, Brian was losing control. He was putting his entire body weight onto the crowbar. The drywall around the safe began to crack. He did not care about the damage. He was an animal trying to get to the meat. With a loud metallic pop, the locking bolt sheared. The heavy steel door swung open. Brian dropped the tools. He let out a sob of relief. He reached into the dark cavity of the safe. His hands were shaking so badly, the flashlight beam was dancing on the walls. He expected stacks of $100 bills. He expected salvation. He pulled his hand out. It held a single thin white envelope. He froze. He shined the light inside the safe again. Empty. Nothing but dust. He felt around the back, hoping for a hidden compartment. There was nothing. He looked at the envelope. It had his name written on it in my handwriting. Brian. He tore it open. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. I knew exactly what it said because I had typed it on my vintage typewriter 2 weeks ago. I know about Future Tech Solutions, LLC. I know about the $200,000 you wired from the IRA. I have the bank records. I have the IP logs. I have the affidavit from your roommate. The FBI has been notified of wire fraud and elder financial abuse. They are just waiting for my final call. Put the crowbar down, Brian. It is over. I watched him read it. I saw his eyes scan the lines. I saw the exact moment the words registered in his brain. His knees gave out. He did not sit down, he collapsed. He slid down the wall until he hit the floor. The paper fell from his hand. He looked at the camera. He knew I was watching. He knew the infrared eye in the corner was recording his felony break and recording his face reading the indictment. He started to cry. It was not a dignified cry. It was the weeping of a man who realizes he has walked off a cliff. He curled into a ball on the floor of my study, surrounded by the ruin of his own making. He had thought I was a foolish old man, a resource to be mined. He did not know that I audit everything. He did not know that while he was playing poker, I was tracking every penny. He was not just broke now. He was a felon. And he was trapped in a dark house with the evidence of his guilt staring him in the face. I closed the iPad cover. The satisfaction was cold and heavy like a stone. I did not feel happy. I felt vindicated. There is a difference. Happiness is warm. Vindication is ice. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were still bright. Tomorrow was the gala. Rachel was still planning her party. She did not know that her husband was currently fetal on the floor of her father's study, destroying his life. She did not know that the house she was planning to show off was about to be taken away. The pieces were all in place. The trap was sprung. Brian was neutralized. Now it was just Rachel. And Mr. Henderson was coming in the morning. I went to the bedroom to get a few hours of sleep. I needed to be rested. The finale was going to be spectacular. It was 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening, and the silence of my exclusive neighborhood was being murdered by the industrial roar of a diesel generator. I sat on my hotel balcony watching the live feed on my tablet. The machine sat in the middle of the manicured front lawn, like a rusting beast vibrating and spewing black smoke into the humid air. Rachel had rented it that morning. I saw the delivery truck arrive. She had paid in cash, likely pawning some of the jewelry I had given her mother to cover the rental deposit and the catering. This was the gala. This was the event that was supposed to launch her lifestyle brand, a vague business concept that seemed to involve selling candles and overpriced yoga mats to people with more money than sense. She had invited 50 of the most influential people in Greenwich. She needed investors. She needed validation. But most of all, she needed a cash injection to keep the illusion of her life afloat. The house looked ridiculous. Thick orange extension cords snaked through the front door, and open windows feeding power to a few standing lamps and a portable sound system. The central air conditioning remained dead. The temperature inside was 85 degrees. Rachel had placed electric fans in the corners, but they were just pushing hot air around. I watched the guests arrive. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Women in cocktail dresses and men in linen suits stepped out, wrinkling their noses at the smell of diesel fumes. They looked at the generator. They looked at the dark windows of the upper floors. They exchanged glances. This was the elite crowd Rachel desperately wanted to belong to. These were people who could smell desperation, like sharks smell blood in the water. Rachel stood at the door greeting them. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that was entirely inappropriate for the heat. Her hair was piled high on her head, likely to keep it off her sweating neck. She was smiling a wide, manic grin that did not reach her eyes. She was talking too fast. I could not hear every word over the drone of the generator, but I could read her body language. She was frantic. I switched to the interior camera in the living room. The furniture had been pushed back. Waiters hired from a discount agency were passing around trays of appetizers that looked suspiciously like they came from the frozen food aisle of Costco. The guests were fanning themselves with cocktail napkins. The humidity was already making hair frizz and makeup run. I zoomed in on a conversation near the fireplace. A woman with a pearl necklace leaned in to ask Rachel a question. I turned up the volume on my iPad, hoping the microphone would pick it up over the background noise. "Where is Harold?" the woman asked, looking around. "I thought he would be here. I wanted to ask him about his time in shipping." Rachel laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. "Oh, Dad is in Europe. He decided to take a last-minute trip to the south of France. You know how he is, always jet-setting. He sends his love." I took a sip of my iced tea. The south of France. I was 3 miles away in a hotel room watching her lie with the ease of a sociopath. She preferred to invent a glamorous fiction rather than admit her father had walked out on her. She needed my prestige. She needed the weight of my name to legitimize her scam. Even in my absence, she was using me. Then Brian appeared. He walked into the room from the hallway that led to the study. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too large for him now, as if the stress of the last 48 hours had physically shrunk him. His face was gray. His eyes were darting around the room looking for threats, looking for the police, looking for me. He knew about the safe. He knew about the FBI. He knew that every second he spent in this house was borrowed time. But Rachel had forced him to perform. She needed him to play the successful husband. She needed the tableau to be perfect. He walked up to a group of men near the bar. He tried to smile. He tried to engage in banter. But his hands were shaking so badly, he spilled champagne on his sleeve. He looked at the camera in the corner. He stared right at me. There was no defiance left in him. Just terror. He knew I was the audience. He knew I was the judge. The party was a disaster in slow motion. The generator sputtered and coughed, causing the lights to flicker ominously. The music cut out and then surged back at a deafening volume. The guests were checking their watches. They were finishing their drinks quickly. They wanted to leave. The heat was oppressive. The vibe was toxic. They knew something was wrong. They knew money does not make this much noise. Rachel tapped a glass with a spoon. She stood in the center of the room, sweating in her gold dress. "Everyone, please listen," she shouted over the roar of the engine outside. "We are so glad you are here to celebrate the launch of Lux Life. We are looking for ground floor partners to join us on this journey." She began her pitch. It was a word salad of buzzwords: synergy, holistic, paradigm shift. She was asking for money. She was begging for a lifeline. She looked around the room, searching for a checkbook, searching for a savior. She did not know that her time was already up. I looked away from the screen and out the window. Down on the street far below, I saw the flashing lights. Not one car, not two. A convoy. 4 police cruisers and 2 black SUVs were moving silently through traffic, heading north toward the hills. Heading toward my house. Mr. Henderson was punctual. He was a man of his word. I had signed the papers electronically, an hour ago. The deed was transferred. The eviction notice was filed. The grace period was 0. I looked back at the screen. Rachel was raising a glass for a toast. To family, she said, and to the future. The future was pulling into the driveway. The blue lights washed over the front lawn, illuminating the generator in harsh strobes. The guests near the window turned to look. The chatter stopped. The music seemed to fade away. Rachel lowered her glass. She followed their gaze. She saw the police. She saw the man in the dark suit getting out of the lead car. She probably thought they were there for the noise complaint. She probably thought she could talk her way out of it. She did not know that the party was over. She did not know that the landlord had arrived. I set my tea down. I leaned forward. This was the payoff. This was the moment the ledger balanced. I watched as the front door opened. The heat of the night rushed in, and with it came the cold, hard truth. The front door of the mansion swung open not by the hand of a welcoming host, but by the firm push of a uniformed sheriff's deputy. The heavy oak slammed against the interior wall with a sound that cut through the drone of the generator outside like a gunshot. On my screen, the effect was instantaneous. The 50 guests in the living room froze. The woman who had been asking about my shipping career dropped her fork. It clattered against a china plate, a tiny sound of domestic violence in a room held breathlessly still. Rachel stopped mid-toast. Her arm was still raised, the cheap champagne bubbling in the glass. She looked at the door. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear a smudge from her vision. She saw the sheriff. She saw 2 deputies behind him. And then she saw the man in the charcoal suit stepping through the police line. It was Mr. Henderson. He looked exactly as a man who owns $300 million in real estate should look. Bored, efficient, and utterly devoid of empathy. He carried a black leather folio in his left hand. Behind him, a team of 6 men in gray coveralls waited on the porch. They wore gloves. They carried packing crates. They were the cleanup crew. Rachel lowered her glass. She forced a smile onto her face, a rictus of terror and denial. She walked toward the sheriff, her gold sequins shimmering under the harsh work lights she had set up. "Officer," she said, her voice shrill, "thank goodness you are here. The neighbors have been harassing us about the noise. We have a permit for the generator. My husband was just about to turn it off." The sheriff did not smile. He did not take off his hat. He looked at Rachel with the weary expression of a man who has seen every variation of delusion the county has to offer. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, "we are not here for a noise complaint. We are here to effectuate a transfer of property possession and to assist in a civil eviction." Rachel laughed. It was a wet, choking sound. "Eviction? That is absurd. My father owns this house. He is in Europe. You have made a mistake." The sheriff stepped aside. Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He placed his folio on the entryway table, sweeping aside a vase of wilting flowers Rachel had placed there. He opened the file. The sound of the crisp paper turning was amplified by the sudden silence of the room. Even the generator seemed to quiet down, as if the machine itself was listening. "Good evening, Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was dry like sandpaper on wood. "My name is Robert Henderson. I am the managing partner of Henderson Property Holdings, and as of 48 hours ago, I am the sole owner of this estate." Rachel stared at him. The guests stared at him. Brian, who had been cowering near the bar, turned a shade of white that I did not know human skin could achieve. "You are lying," Rachel spat. "My father would never sell this house. It is my inheritance." Mr. Henderson pulled a document from the file. He held it up. It was a deed. A very specific type of deed. "Your father did not sell the house this week, Mrs. Anderson. He sold the title to my firm 6 months ago. He executed a life estate deed. Are you familiar with the term? Rachel shook her head dumbly. It means, Mr. Henderson continued, enjoying the moment, that your father transferred ownership to me, but retained the right to live on the premises for the remainder of his life. It is a common tool for estate planning. It allows the occupant to remain until death. Rachel let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. See, she said, turning to the guests. He still lives here. It is his house. You cannot throw us out. Mr. Henderson raised a finger. One finger. It silenced her immediately. However, he said, there is a clause, a specific condition written into the contract at Mr. Anderson's insistence. Clause 14, Section B. The voluntary vacation clause. It states that if the life tenant leaves the property for a period exceeding 48 hours without notifying the title holder, and if he surrenders his means of access, then the life estate is immediately terminated. The right of occupancy dissolves, and full possession reverts to the title holder. Immediate possession. Rachel's mouth opened. She looked like a fish on a dock. What she whispered. Mr. Henderson pulled out an evidence bag. Inside was a set of keys. The brass key, the silver key, the electronic fob. They were scratched. They had dirt on them. My landscaping crew found these in the rose bushes at the end of your driveway this morning, Mr. Henderson said. Your father threw them there on Friday night. He left the property. He has been gone for 96 hours. He did not notify me. Therefore, he has triggered the clause. He has voluntarily surrendered the estate. I took a sip of my tea in the hotel room. I watched Rachel's face crumble. She was replaying the scene in her mind. Friday night. Me standing on the porch. The arc of the keys flying through the air. Her screaming at me to pick them up. She had watched me do it. She had watched me sign her eviction notice, and she had thought I was just having a tantrum. But Dad is coming back, Rachel shrieked. He is just on a trip. This is a mistake. You cannot do this. He is not coming back, Mr. Henderson said coldly. I spoke with his attorney, Mr. Ross, an hour ago. Mr. Anderson has confirmed his intent to vacate. He has no desire to live here anymore. And since you are guests of the life tenant and the life tenancy has expired, you are now trespassers. He gestured to the sheriff. Sheriff, if you please. The sheriff stepped forward. His hand rested on his belt. Folks, the party is over, he announced to the room. This property is now under the control of Henderson Holdings. Everyone who does not reside here needs to leave immediately. Residents, you have 30 minutes to gather personal essentials, clothes and medication only. Furniture, electronics, and valuables stay until ownership can be verified. Chaos erupted. It was beautiful. The socialites of Greenwich do not handle police raids well. There was a scramble for purses, a rush for the door. Women were tripping over their high heels. Men were shouting for valets who weren't there. Wait, Rachel screamed, grabbing the arm of a potential investor. Do not go. This is a legal mix-up. We will sort this out. The investor pulled his arm away as if she were contagious. Do not touch me, he hissed. You said your father was in France. You said you owned the company. You are a fraud. He stormed out. The room was emptying fast. The dream of the gala was dying on the floor, trampled by expensive shoes. Mr. Henderson snapped his fingers. The 6 men in gray coveralls marched into the house. They moved with military precision. 2 of them went to the television. 2 of them went to the paintings on the wall. They were not moving them. They were tagging them. They were putting stickers on everything that was now considered an asset of the property owner. Rachel ran to Mr. Henderson. She grabbed his lapel. You cannot do this, she sobbed. This is my home. My son lives here. My clothes are here, Mr. Henderson peeled her fingers off his suit. He dusted off the fabric. This is not your home, Mrs. Anderson. It never was. You were a guest, and you have overstayed. You have 30 minutes. If you are not out, the sheriff will arrest you for criminal trespass." He looked at his watch. 29 minutes. Then I saw Brian. He had not moved from the bar. He was watching the scene unfold with a strange detachment. He saw the police. He saw the movers. He saw his wife screaming. But his eyes were focused on something else. He was looking at the front door, waiting for something. He did not have to wait long. Two men in windbreakers walked in behind the sheriff. They did not look like local police. They had earpieces. They had badges on their belts that were not stars. They were shields. FBI. Brian saw them. His legs gave out. He slumped against the bar, knocking over a tower of champagne glasses. The crash was deafening. The agents walked straight to him. They did not run. They did not shout. They knew he wasn't going anywhere. "Brian Miller," one of the agents said. Brian nodded slowly. He held out his hands. He did not even wait for the command. He wanted to be taken away. He wanted to be anywhere but in that house with his wife and her failure. They cuffed him. They led him out past Rachel, who was too busy screaming at a mover touching her vase to notice her husband was being arrested by the federal government. I watched it all. The screen of my iPad was a window into a hell I had constructed. The house was being stripped. The guests were fleeing. The family was being dismantled piece by piece. Rachel stood alone in the center of the living room. The generator outside finally ran out of fuel. It sputtered and died. The lights connected to the extension cords flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the flashlights of the sheriff's deputies and the cold blue strobe of the police cruisers outside. Rachel looked around the dark, empty room. She looked at the camera. "Dad," she whispered into the blackness. "Dad, help me." I reached out and pressed the button on my screen. Connection terminated. I closed the app. The show was over. The curtain had fallen. I had my answer. They did not care when I was there. They only cared when I was gone. And now I was gone for good. The darkness in the living room was absolute, save for the harsh beams of the deputies' flashlights cutting through the gloom, like searchlights in a prison yard. Brian was gone, taken out the back door in handcuffs by federal agents, leaving a void where his pathetic arrogance used to be. Now the spotlight turned solely to Rachel. She stood in the center of the room, her gold-sequined dress catching the erratic light, making her look like a disco ball in a mausoleum. She was trembling not from the cold, but from a rage so pure it vibrated through the screen of my iPad. "This is illegal," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. "You cannot throw me out. This is my house. My mother died in this house. It is my inheritance. It is my birthright. You are stealing from me." She lunged toward Mr. Henderson, her hands curled into claws. A deputy stepped in front of her, blocking her path with a solid wall of uniformed indifference. Rachel bounced off him, stumbling back in her high heels. Mr. Henderson did not flinch. He adjusted his glasses and opened the black folio again. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a deed this time. It was a letter. A letter I had written 3 years ago when Rachel first demanded I put her name on the title. Mrs. Anderson. Mr. Henderson said, his voice calm and dry, echoing in the silent room. "There is no inheritance to claim because there is no estate to inherit. This document is a revocable license of occupancy signed by your father. Do you remember this?" Rachel stared at the paper. Her eyes widened. "It states clearly," Henderson continued reading by the light of a deputy's torch, "that Rachel Anderson and her family are permitted to reside on the premises solely at the discretion of the owner, Harold Anderson. It specifies that no rent is charged, but in exchange the occupants agree that they hold no tenancy rights, no equity interest, and no claim to the title. It further states that this license can be revoked at any time without cause." He lowered the paper. "Your father did not just sell the house, Mrs. Anderson. He clarified your status years ago. You were never the owner. You were never the heir apparent. You were a charity case. A guest who was allowed to stay because of blood, not law. And tonight, the charity has ended. Rachel shook her head violently. No, she whispered. No, he wouldn't do that. He promised me. He said this was all for me. He promised you a home, Henderson corrected. He did not promise you a kingdom, and you repaid his generosity by telling him to shut up at his own dinner table. You repaid him by trying to commit him to a mental institution. You broke the contract, Mrs. Anderson, moral and legal. He turned to the sheriff. Sheriff, please clear the building. We need to secure the assets. The sheriff nodded. He turned to the crowd of guests who were huddled near the foyer, clutching their designer purses and watching the drama with morbid fascination. These were the people Rachel had tried so hard to impress. The socialites, the influencers, the people she thought would validate her existence. Now they were witnesses to her complete dismantling. All right, folks, the sheriff bellowed. Party is over. Everyone out. This is now a crime scene and a foreclosure site. Go home. The stampede began. It was not dignified. There were no goodbyes. No one stopped to offer Rachel comfort. They just wanted to escape the taint of failure. As they shuffled past her, I could hear their whispers picked up by the high-fidelity microphone on the security camera. Did you hear that she was living here for free? I heard her husband stole money. She told me she owned the company. What a fraud. I am deleting her number. Rachel stood there listening to her social standing evaporate. She reached out to grab the arm of a woman she considered her best friend, a woman named Jessica who ran a boutique in town. Jess, wait, Rachel pleaded. Can I stay with you tonight? Just for a night, until I sort this out. Jessica pulled her arm away as if Rachel were burning. She smoothed her dress, looking at Rachel with cold, dead eyes. I don't think so, Rachel. I have a reputation to think about. And honestly, you still owe me for the dress you are wearing. She walked out, leaving Rachel alone in the dark. Ma'am, the deputy said, taking Rachel's arm. It is time to go. Rachel planted her feet. No, I am not leaving. You will have to drag me out. I am not going out there. Mr. Henderson sighed. He looked tired. He looked like a man who just wanted to go home to his own paid-off house. Sheriff, remove the trespasser. 2 deputies moved in. They grabbed Rachel by the arms. She screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that made the speakers on my iPad distort. She kicked and thrashed. Her gold dress ripped at the seam. Her carefully pinned hair came loose, falling in wild strands across her face. They marched her to the front door. She dragged her heels across the hardwood floors, leaving scuff marks that would have to be buffed out. They pushed through the open doorway and out onto the front porch. The humidity of the night hit her. The roar of the generator had stopped, but the air is still thick with diesel fumes. The deputies did not stop at the porch. They marched her down the steps. Rachel stumbled. Her heel caught on the edge of the stone pateth. She fell. She landed hard on the front lawn. It had rained briefly earlier in the evening, a summer sun shower I had missed from my hotel room. The ground was soft and wet. The grass was muddy where the landscaper had trampled it, trying to retrieve his equipment. Rachel fell face first into the mud. Her gold-sequined dress, the symbol of her vanity, soaked up the dirty water. She tried to push herself up, but her hands slipped. She rolled over, sitting in the muck, her legs sprawled in front of her. She looked up at the house she thought was hers, the house where she had tormented me. Mr. Henderson stood in the doorway, backlit by the flashlight beam, like a guardian angel of eviction. "Do not come back," Mrs. Anderson, Henderson called out. "If you step foot on this property again, you will be arrested. Your personal effects will be boxed and left at the curb on Friday. I suggest you find a U-Haul." He closed the heavy oak door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was final. It was the period at the end of a very long sentence. Rachel sat in the mud. The police cruisers were pulling away, their job done. The guests were gone, their taillights fading down the street. She was alone. Truly alone. Covered in dirt in the dark, with no money, no husband, and no home. She looked at the security camera mounted above the garage. She knew I was there. She knew I was the architect of this moment. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She just slumped forward, burying her face in her muddy hands, and wept. It was not a cry for help. It was the sound of a reality check cashing itself. I watched for a moment longer. Then I reached out and closed the app. The screen went black. The show was over. I had my life back. I had my dignity back. And somewhere in the dark, Rachel was finally learning the lesson I should have taught her 20 years ago. You cannot bite the hand that feeds you and expect it to keep serving you dinner. 3 days after the lights went out in the mansion, I sat at a table at the Saltwater Grill overlooking the Long Island Sound. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the water. I was eating a lobster roll and drinking a glass of iced tea. I felt different. The constant tightness in my chest, the low-level anxiety that had been my companion for a decade, was gone. I felt light. I felt young. I looked at my reflection in the silverware. The lines on my face seemed less deep. The shadows under my eyes had vanished. Freedom, it turns out, is the best anti-aging cream money can buy. I saw them walking up the pier before they saw me. They looked like refugees from a failed reality show. Rachel was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that looked wrinkled. Her hair, usually sprayed into submission, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore no makeup. Her face was puffy red and blotchy. She looked 10 years older than she had on Friday. Brian was trailing behind her. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, even though it was 70 degrees. He walked with his head down. I noticed the bulge around his ankle under the fabric, an electronic monitoring bracelet. He was out on bail pending the federal indictment for wire fraud and embezzlement. His passport had been surrendered. His assets were frozen. He was a prisoner in his own skin. They stopped at my table. They did not ask to sit. They just collapsed into the empty chairs opposite me. The waiter approached, looking concerned, but I waved him away. "Hello, Rachel," I said. "Hello, Brian. You look tired." Rachel stared at me. Her eyes were full of hate and confusion and a deep, terrifying desperation. "You ruined us," she whispered. Her voice was raspy. "We are homeless, Dad. We are staying at a Motel 6 by the highway. Justin won't speak to me. Brian is facing 20 years in prison. You ruined everything." I took a bite of my lobster roll. It was perfectly seasoned. "I did not ruin anything, Rachel," I said, chewing slowly. "I simply stopped fixing what you broke. There is a difference." "You called the FBI," Brian said. He did not look up from the table. "You sent them the records. You sent them the IP logs. You set me up." I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "I audited my books, Brian. I found a discrepancy. I reported it to the authorities. That is not a setup. That is due diligence. You stole $200,000 from a man you called a spare part. You thought I was too old to notice. You thought I was too stupid to trace a wire transfer. You were wrong." Rachel slammed her hand on the table. It was a weak echo of the slam that had started this whole war on Friday night. "Stop it," she hissed. "Just stop it. We get it, okay? You made your point. You won. Now fix it. Drop the charges against Brian. Buy the house back from Henderson. We can go back to how it was. I promise I will be nicer. I promise we will listen to you. Just please, Dad. I cannot live in a motel. I am your daughter." I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for a shred of the little girl who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. I searched for the young woman who cried when her goldfish died. I found nothing. All I saw was a calculator. All I saw was a woman who measured love in square footage and credit limits. I reached into my leather briefcase, which was sitting on the chair next to me. I pulled out a small black moleskin notebook. It was worn at the edges. I had carried it for 20 years. I slid it across the table. "What is this?" Rachel asked, looking at it like it was a poem. "Open it," I said. She opened the book. Her eyes scanned the pages, filled with my neat handwriting. Rows and columns of numbers, dates, amounts. "Page 1, I said. "The year you turned 18. Tuition, room and board, sorority dues, spring break trips, a new car because you didn't like the color of the used one I bought you. Total $250,000. She turned the page. Her hand trembled. "Page 10, I said. "The wedding, the dress, the venue, the open bar, the honeymoon in Bali, $85,000. She kept turning. "Page 20, I continued. "The house down payment, the monthly allowance disguised as consulting fees for Brian's fake companies, the credit card bills I paid quietly because I didn't want you to have bad credit, the private school for Justin, the landscaper, the pool boy, the groceries." I leaned forward. "Turn to the last page, Rachel." She turned to the end. There was a single number circled in red ink. $4,200,000. I tapped the table. "That is the total, Rachel. That is the cost of your love. That is the price of my silence for the last 20 years. $4.2 million. I have paid for every meal you ate, every dress you wore, every mistake you made." Rachel looked up. Tears were streaming down her face now, so what she sobbed. "You are rich. You can afford it. What is money to you?" "It is not about the money," I said softly. "It is about the return on investment. In business, when you pour capital into a venture, you expect growth. You expect profit. Or at least you expect gratitude." I looked at Brian. I looked at Rachel. I poured $4 million into this family, and the return was zero. The return was disrespect. The return was theft. The return was you telling me to shut up at my own table and plotting to put me in a cage. I closed the notebook. I took it back. "I do not owe you anything anymore, Rachel. The ledger is balanced. I consider that $4 million the severance package. I bought my freedom, and it was worth every penny." I stood up. I dropped a $100 bill on the table for the waiter. Brian looked up finally. His eyes were red. "Where are you going, Hal?" he asked. I adjusted my blazer. I checked my watch. "I have a flight to catch, Brian, and you have a court date. I suggest you save your energy for the judge." I turned and walked away. "Dad!" "Wait!" Rachel screamed. "Dad, please don't leave us! What are we going to do?" I did not stop. I did not slow down. I walked out of the restaurant and into the warm sea breeze. I heard her crying behind me, a loud, ugly sound that drew stares from the other diners. But for the first time in my life, her tears did not make me stop. They were just noise. And I was done with noise. A black town car was waiting for me at the curb. The driver opened the door. "To the airfield, Mr. Anderson?" he asked. "Yes, James," I said. "To the airfield." I got in. The car pulled away. I watched through the tinted rear window as Rachel ran out of the restaurant. She stood on the sidewalk watching the car disappear into traffic. She looked small. She looked lost. She looked like someone who had just realized that the bank of Dad was closed forever. 20 minutes later, The car pulled onto the tarmac of the private airfield. The Gulfstream G650 sat there gleaming white against the blue sky. It was a beautiful machine, a symbol of everything I had achieved and everything I had hidden. I walked up the stairs. The stewardess greeted me with a glass of champagne. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Anderson. Your guests are already seated." I walked into the cabin. Sitting in the plush leather seats were three men, Arthur, Samuel, and Walter. They were members of the investment club Rachel had mocked for years. She called them the Senile Squad. She did not know that together we controlled more capital than a small country. They were my friends. They were men who knew the value of loyalty. Hal Arthur said, raising his glass. "You made it." I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I made it, Arthur. The baggage has been unloaded." I sat in the window seat. The engines whined to life, a low, powerful hum that vibrated through the floor. I opened the wood-paneled table in front of me. I laid out a large vintage map of the world. It was worn at the creases. Catherine and I had bought it 40 years ago. We used to trace routes with our fingers, dreaming of the places we would go when we retired. Before the cancer took her. Before the grief trapped me in that house. I placed my hand on the map. I traced the line across the Atlantic. "Where to first?" Hal Walter asked. I looked at the map. I looked at the spot Catherine had circled in red ink so many years ago. "Paris," I said. "We are going to Paris." The plane began to taxi. I looked out the window as the ground began to rush by. The hangars blurred. The trees became green streaks, and then with a surge of power we lifted off. I watched the ground fall away. I saw the highways. I saw the coastline. I saw the sprawling suburbs of Connecticut. Somewhere down there in that grid of tiny houses was a mansion with no lights. Somewhere down there was a woman sitting in the dark, realizing that she was alone. They say family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that you must sacrifice yourself on the altar of your children's happiness. They are wrong. Respect is everything. Dignity is everything. Without respect, family is just a word. It is a biological accident. It is an empty noun that people use to manipulate you. I looked at the clouds rushing past the window. I was 71 years old. I had lost my wife. I had lost my daughter. But as the plane banked toward the east, toward the ocean, toward the future, I realized something profound. I had found myself, and I liked the company. The stewardess refilled my glass. "To new beginnings, Mr. Anderson," she said. I raised the glass. The bubbles danced in the sunlight. "No," I whispered. "To the end of bad investments." I took a sip. It tasted like the sky. It tasted like the rest of my life. And for the first time in a long time, the view was spectacular. We are often taught that family loyalty is absolute, but Harold's story proves that blood is not a license for abuse. Generosity without boundaries isn't love. It is simply enabling toxicity. When you continuously fund disrespect, you aren't supporting your family. You are financing your own humiliation. Harold learned that the most expensive thing he ever paid for was the illusion of being needed. True peace only comes when you realize that your dignity is non-negotiable. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from the people who only love you for what you can give them. If you believe Harold made the right decision to choose his dignity over his daughter, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.